thank you very much. Really appreciate your insights and adding to this gumbo essentially that we produce.
Sure.
Okay, so finally we're going to have Elizabeth Cambre, and she's going to detail negotiations. And so I met Elizabeth a few years ago, and just kind of, I always saw her just, seeming to move on to, a new positions when nobody else was moving, and I was intrigued. I was like, there's got to be something about what she's doing, and she revealed to me, what it was. And so, Elizabeth, thank you for being with us and for sharing your knowledge and your wisdom with the group.
Yeah, great, thank you. So first off, you can see my screen in full slide mode, correct? And you can hear me? Yes? Okay. Well, why don't I go ahead and start just by giving an introduction to myself. So I've been in the oil and gas industry now for about almost 13 years. I actually graduated with 5 degrees at once from University of Colorado at Boulder. I'll tell you what they are, if I can remember all of them. Chemical engineer, Chinese, math, economics, and international affairs. And when I graduated, I got a job with Schlumberger working in China. Unfortunately, en route to China, I didn't make it there. I was rerouted to Oman. So I spent 4 years of my career as a frac engineer in the Middle East, first starting just working in the field, living in a frac caravan in Oman. I fracked the first BP well, actually, in Oman. And then I went and worked on the Big Orange 25, one of the well stimulation vessels in Qatar, and then moved to become a technical sales engineer in Abu Dhabi and Dubai. And then Baker Hughes transferred me, or hired me, and brought me to the US, and I held roles of being acidizing and fracturing instructor, and I worked my way up into the product line and pressure pumping, and in 2017 was the global product line manager. And that's when I took my first negotiation training, but we'll come back to that. But from there, I followed my manager that I had at Baker. He then became the CEO at Tendeka, and he asked me to come on board and develop a product line for fracturing technologies at Tendeka, which I did for 2 years, and then was approached by ZL Chemicals, which is it is the largest privately owned polyacrylamide manufacturer in China. So they make the polyacrylamide that is the fundamental base that's used in fracturing fluids. And then very quickly thereafter, I was approached by Baker Hughes and their turbo machinery group to join their team, which I did a month ago. It started in April, and I'm working on electric fracturing currently. But this evening, I'm going to touch on how I look at negotiation, and especially when we're discussing negotiating for oneself. So I look at networking as being the critical part of being able to effectively negotiate for oneself. And I'm going to explain how I get to that conclusion later on in my few slides that I have here. But first off, I want to say to individuals who ask me what are the 2 skills that they should brush up on while looking for a job during this downtime, hands down, I recommend investing in a negotiation training course, and then plan to just network. I even say minimize time spent on filling out job applications, as most jobs are actually going to come through networking. And so for myself, I was trained back in 2017 on how to negotiate from the London-based negotiation lab. And they conduct simulated Harvard-based case negotiations, where you actually are given cases and you are given one side and you have to prepare and study it. And then you're monitored either in person or online by multiple coaches. And then you're critiqued and given feedback. And I found it to be an amazing way to learn how to negotiate. And then at the end of that, in 2017, I actually started to collaborate with the negotiation lab because there's different thinking out there that women and men negotiate differently, especially when you start to talk about negotiating for yourself. And so I wanted to explore that with the negotiation lab, and we actually collaborated and came up with a whole course that was really targeted towards females and teaching them how to negotiate for themselves. So my key takeaway from learning negotiation was that I needed to network more. And I will, just going to kind of skip through some slides, the next slide, explain why am I thinking I need to network when I'm learning how to negotiate. And it really all comes down to that best alternative to a negotiated agreement, or what is otherwise known as a BATNA. So sorry, and I needed to move that slide forward. So that is best alternative to a negotiated agreement. So let's step back though to look at what are some of these systematic approaches to negotiation so you can understand when that BATNA comes into play. All right, so the first part of preparation when you're looking at going into a negotiation is to really understand your own personal interests. You want to make sure you write them down. You want to understand what you value and what you're concerned about. Then you want to look at the alternative party that you're negotiating against, and you want to try to identify their interests and what they value and what they're concerned with. And a third step of preparation is to actually take a stab at identifying all the different possible agreements or arrangements that could be potentially reached.
Elizabeth, how do you identify the other party's interests? Do you speak with them? Do you try to use your imagination? How do you do that?
That's a really good question. I think it's being able to ask the right questions. Number one, if you don't know and it's not already something that you're aware of, but it's putting yourself in a situation to where they will open up and also reveal to some degree, what their interests are. But I think a lot of that comes through having multiple rounds of discourse around it. And I know that's something that's hard, and sometimes you have to make those assumptions, but you could even go into a negotiation and you could say, look, I am assuming that these are your interests. Can you validate if these are your interests? Because this is how I am planning to negotiate, is based on me assuming you value this or that. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, but it's a strategy.
So that's very interesting. It's very upfront way of doing it. I've never. Well, actually, James kinds of uses that method, but I don't see many people use that. Is that a common method that people use?
Yeah, I mean, when you're studying these Harvard cases, you get all this background information, and you study it, and you kind of understand, especially if they're more complex and you're talking legal type of negotiations, you will have some context and detail. But sometimes it's not as complex as that. Sometimes it's literally just a case of being able to not come off as being, so aggressive or so, you're putting the other party off. You want to be approachable so that you can understand that we can get to an agreement that benefits both of us. It doesn't have to be a one-sided agreement that is more in the favor of one party rather than the other.
It's interesting you say that. Have you heard of Chris Voss?
Name doesn't pop.
So yeah, he was like one of the top negotiators with the FBI, and he says that that's one of the ways that he uses is to be approachable. I'll let you carry on with your presentation.
Yeah.
Thank
you. Yeah, no worries. Okay, so try to imagine what type of arrangements could be made would be a step that you would do in preparing before you get to your actual negotiation. And then a fourth point would be bring in any type of documentation that can really legitimize the agreement. And perhaps when you're negotiating for yourself, this could be, your certification of training or pay stub or awards or just testimonials. But for me, I would try to get as creative as possible if I were negotiating for myself with that realm. And then fifth, it goes back to know your best alternative to a negotiated agreement or BATNA. So know when you're going to walk away. I've got another slide on that, so I'll come back. But the sixth point I think is so important, and I think many people miss this and make a big mistake and waste lots of money and time on this. There have been many times, even though I was trained on this, that I negotiate with a party and we don't write it down what we negotiated, and then each party looks at what was written down and signs off on it. More often than not, you verbally agree to what you negotiated, you go your own way, you come back and you summarize it, and all of a sudden you hear one party say, well, that's not what I agreed to. So it's so important because people really do hear one thing when they're negotiating and really mean something else. It's just a common, mishap that happens. So write down the outcome and get both parties to agree right then and there on that outcome. So going back to that BATNA. So that BATNA is the best alternative to a deal, and it needs to be clearly identified and understood. So if you're negotiating for yourself and you're negotiating for a job, you better have a BATNA that is another job that makes you so confident that you can ask for whatever you want, because this is your best alternative that if you don't get at least what this offers, you're going to walk away, and that's when no deal will be made. And so from my perspective, the best way to have multiple BATNAs is to network. That's how I found myself every time I have taken on a new role. I have found myself with multiple alternatives that have allowed me to make decisions that have helped propel me in my career. Okay, so then I conclude my slides with suggestions on how to network. Because I thought a lot about networking, and I know everyone says network, but how can you do it really effectively, and how can you do it to make it enhance your life? Well, the first thing I would say to some individuals, because I've actually heard individuals say this to me, is why would anyone want to talk to me? And I say, why not? So I encourage everyone to have a quick self-reflection on yourself and find that confidence that you need and know what you bring to the table so that you can reach out to anyone. You've heard it multiple times today, but leverage the power of LinkedIn and reach out to people using LinkedIn and go to look at second and third connections. I just think LinkedIn is one of the most powerful and interesting tools because I meet so many amazing people with so many interesting stories on LinkedIn. I can't get enough of it. And then, of course, I have to include Zoom with your LinkedIn network. So I'm always trying to put myself, naturally what I do is I'm always testing the waters, trying to push my boundaries and push myself into uncomfortable situations. So, during COVID, first week this happened, I said, ooh, I'm going to start Zooming with people, and I'm going to start Zooming with random people I don't know, and I'm going to bring in groups of people. And so just as an example, because I thought it was pretty interesting, I had a Zoom party with the CEO of LO3 Energy. He does microgrids with solar panels that's sitting in California. And then I asked an individual who used to be the chief energy advisor at Baker Hughes, John May, who I didn't know, and then a fellow frac engineer, Karen Olson, who was the director of technology at Southwestern. Let's all hop on a Zoom call. We don't know each other, and let's have dialogue. And it was amazing. And a lot of great connections were built that way. So always testing the waters with that. Grow your LinkedIn network. I know LinkedIn says, don't be careful how you grow it. But I had since 2017, I had goals to grow it. So I wanted to connect to more people. I wanted to be able to utilize the influence that network provides. And so I had a steady growth plan to now where I think I'm sitting at 16,000, and it's a pretty powerful reach when you want to share content and things that you believe in. So another point I say is when you are networking, and a lot of people, they go back to networking when they're losing a job or when they are looking for a new job or they lost a new job. And I would just say, or they're trying to sell something. It's very clear when you come across that way. And I would say that's what you want to try to avoid, because people are so interesting, and just getting to know and being genuinely interested in people and what they are doing will have far more award, what's the right word to say, will be far more of an award than just reaching out to your network saying, hey, I've lost my job. Do you know of any open positions? So that's just my suggestion is network with a genuine interest to get to know the people in your network. And then when you're reaching out on LinkedIn, just reach out all the time. And if it doesn't work, change your message, but don't give up and don't feel defeated. And I remember when I first started networking, I made myself have lunch with some stranger. This is back in pre-COVID days where you could go out to lunch. I would go down to the tunnels in Houston and just, I don't remember, I was like at McKinsey one day, Accenture, chatting it with people at Deloitte, and just, I wanted to get to know different parts of the industry, and I would find someone to go have lunch with me. I think I even went to Bain and Company when I was up in Boston and got a tour just because I was interested and reached out. Here's an interesting one. Don't be afraid to engage with individuals at all levels. So I reached out to, I'm going to use this example because I kind of find there to be a little bit of humor in it. Pete Sella, who sits on the board of Saudi Aramco, but used to be the CEO of Chevron Phillips Chemicals. And I used to write pieces about people that I found to be interesting. That's another way of engaging with people. So I actually asked him if I could interview him and get some feedback on, his experience sitting on boards and what he would recommend for individuals who would eventually want to sit on a public board. And so he agreed. And this is the funny part is we agreed to meet at a Starbucks. But the Starbucks that I selected, I didn't realize was at a Kroger where there was nowhere to sit. So I stood in the Kroger interviewing the board member of Saudi Aramco. So just a little fun, just a little humor, but you know where you're going in advance when it's CEO level. But I put on the next piece, write about people who interest you and inspire you. And I do that often, and I'll just publish their stories on LinkedIn. And then I'll just conclude with always offer to help your network. And don't be afraid to put yourself out there and look silly if you end up looking silly. And that's what I've got. Any questions?
Thank you kindly, Elizabeth. I had a few questions prepared for you, but I think you covered some of the things, and then just in interest of time. And then so I'll add, so essentially everybody on this, panel showed us different ways in which you can, negotiate. Actually, I do have a question. You mentioned your network, and you have your BATNA, your best alternative, and being able to have various different, options available when you are looking for work. And I remember having a conversation with you, and you were just, you were like, yeah, and I'm going to pick between this one, and this one. And, I don't know about you, but I'm sometimes in that position, but I'm definitely not always in that position. So, and you may have touched on it, but how do you get into the position where you have several options available? Because, a lot of people are going to be, wanting to.
So, I mean, I think number one, people need to know you're looking, right? So up your package on LinkedIn, get the premium, make sure, recruiters know that you're constantly looking, because there is a button that you have to turn on. And then I would say that, being in the line of technical sales, everybody is always looking for individuals who can have that technical understanding, but then the savviness to be able to walk in and to be able to sell into oil and gas. So I find those type of jobs are constantly in high demand, even today.
All right, fantastic. So we're going to take some, thank you very much.
Not a problem.
I really appreciate you joining me. And then, I'll add that, essentially, the reason we even have this diverse panel is because I've been networking both in person and online. So, I met Brian through an old colleague that I was, working with at an investment bank, and Brian, actually sat on a panel that we had with the Federal Reserve Bank a couple of Fridays ago. I met Jeff through, I think it was at NAPE initially. James obviously online, and then obviously I met you. I think it was actually, so James mentioned at OGGN. OGGN does a networking event, and then I think the common thread in how you have agreed to kind of be on this platform is I'm always, seeking to, sometimes to my own detriment even, add value to people in my network. And so I think, Elizabeth, I've asked you to be on a couple of panels before. I've had Jeff on one, James, done you a bit of networking, and obviously Brian has experienced that twice now as well. And so obviously, you're all in business and you're all trying to get new business, and speaking to an audience, and the way that you've spoken to our audience has, I believe, added a tremendous. You're all very technical people. Everyone in this group is very intelligent, but you've shared and you've given insights, and that will in my mind, help you. This is America. We're all trying to do business. Get business. So, but anyways, I'm going to go to the questions from the audience. And so this one is directed to Jeff. Jeff, what was your first big learning opportunity or mistake when you were starting your company?
My biggest mistake? Wow, there's a lot of them. My biggest mistake, not understanding really how long it could possibly take to achieve that, and understand, because I didn't anticipate that correctly, the use of funds throughout that ran out very quickly. So I think really buckling down and realizing how long it really took, even though we did it in just under a year, which is still impressive at that for that time period, it wasn't nearly as short as I thought it would be. So probably I was a little bit too naive. That'd be my biggest mistake.
That's a good feedback. Another one for Jeff. This is from Aiken. In light of the ongoing changes in the energy industry, what's your prediction of opportunities for entrepreneurs in the oil and gas industry?
Oh man, there's so many opportunities out there. When everybody's crying and there's blood in the streets, that's when the little guy can make his big move. You have to be contrarian. You really have to believe in yourself. As Elizabeth was saying, I think the confidence is a really big thing. When all the arrows are pointing in the other direction, you have to kind of pull yourself in the other. I would say now it's even harder to find your team. But when you do find your team, you all have the same vision. And that's the hardest part with a team, is everybody needs to have the same vision. So in this terrible market where everything looks gloomy and when everybody is telling you you're stupid, that is a very good sign. You can go buy pipeline really cheap right now and then hoard that. You can buy midstream assets because drilling will come back. You can buy midstream assets, which a lot of really wealthy people and funds are doing because midstream is extremely cheap. But the reality is not tomorrow, but in a year or two, we have a lot of surplus. It's going to have to get to market somehow. So you can become the troll toll, so to speak. And you have so many opportunities right now. Conventional space, there's really nobody. Everyone's dying off because they're old. The experience is gone. There's no competition for leasing at all, really. You can clean up. So I would stay away from resource plays for a while. I think holding an acreage position right now is pretty much meaningless unless you have a 5 or more year term outlook. And you can buy production finally, because a lot of private equity banks were making it really hard to buy production in the last 2 years. Now that they've kind of quieted a little bit, it's now finally a buyer's market. You can really get some good deals. So there's always an opportunity. There's always a way to look at things positively. I'd say hang in there, find your team, and try to find something that makes sense for the long-term vision.
Brian, can you touch on any of the points that Jeff made with regard to midstream or anything else?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great point. And we talked a lot about upstream, but if from a private equity perspective, a lot are evaluating whether their documents, their legal documents that are signed by investors and filed with commission, allow them to invest in strategies outside of upstream. So we're seeing a lot of interest in midstream terminals, for example, are a hot deal. Some private equity are even looking at, how long would it take to construct terminals? Because it's something we could construct within a year and have value. So we are seeing an interest and shift from some of the private equity group on that. Absolutely.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you. And this is to Jeff again. Jeff seems to be popular. How did you grow your knowledge of the business side of the industry to the point you created your own company, given you started as a geologist? That's obviously a good question in this group.
Great question. Luckily, the company I worked for, their business model was conventional. And working at a small independent company as opposed to a larger company, you get to wear many hats. So I became very competent in all areas of operations, leasing, negotiations, contract work, geology, geophysics. And I'm not an expert in any of those really, but I'm dangerous. And I got to see how they were making money for their investors. I got a really up close look. I got to sit in on investor meetings, their presentations, how they marketed themselves, and how the returns were made. I mean, it makes a lot of sense. Okay, you put this much money in the ground and you get this much out. But the details of those contracts can get pretty hairy. So I was able to take that knowledge and say, I know how to do this. I know the people. I have a few years of solid experience. Let's at least try. So that I was lucky enough to work at a company beforehand that kind of taught me over the years how to do this step by step. But resources like HGS and APG put on independent, and so does SIPES, independent education seminars once a year usually. So attending one of those will take you from the very beginning, starting day one, to your first deal. And that's what we're really well known for.
Thank you very much. James, what type of LinkedIn content have you noticed builds a strong personal brand? And I'll say doing free resume consultations, I've noticed works for you. But anyways.
I think the most important thing is just to be helpful. That just look at really the reason that I came up with the idea to help with the resume thing is because this is the first time that oil has collapsed at the same time as the rest of the economy. Before, it hasn't happened simultaneously, but I went through a whole week of people just saying, let me know how I can help. Let me know how I can help. Let me know how I can help. And finally, I was, damn it, fine. I'll just do it myself, because when people say, let me know how I can help, a lot of the time that's they're not actually offering help, right? They're just trying to say something to make themselves feel good. A lot of the time. It's one of those things that we say to ourselves, like I'm going to lose this weight eventually. Right? It's just, it's one of the things that we make up. But I went and looked at, I said, okay, what am I good at? Well, I design websites. I design software. I'm a sales copywriter. Resumes. That's it. Cool. So that's all I did was identify something I'm good at and something that I thought I could scale. And I just said, okay, this is how I'll help. And so I put out a very specific ask: send me a resume and I'll help you rewrite it. And so whatever that skill is of yours, that's how I would answer that question. It's not a definitive answer, but it's something that you have to look, like, what would you be passionate about teaching other people? I love helping people understand how to do good copy. I'm a copywriting nerd, right? So it's just, and it helps me too, even as I have helping hundreds of people. It helps, it's good practice, as we call it in well, not we as in I'm a stand-up, but stand-up comedians, they call it stage time, right? So just hundreds and hundreds of opportunities to get up and do reps and just hone my skills and to be able to move that fast to help that many people. So, I mean, people are like, oh, you're not charging for this? I'm like, I should pay you. You know how much you're helping me right now. And so yeah, what are those passions that you have about the industry? I mean, are you really good at it? Would you be passionately, hey, let me help you interpret, whatever rock formation, right? Like, let me offer, and say, well, I can't do that. How can it just help for free? It's like, yeah, because eventually one of them will go, you know what? If we wanted to pay you to do this for us, how much would that cost and what would that look like? Because that's exactly what happened to me. I was just helping someone for free.
Very, very amusing, James. Thank you. Elizabeth, could you tell us some tips for time management in terms of how do you build one's brand and network whilst trying to keep up performance at work? You're obviously a high performance person with your 5 degrees.
Well, that's a great question. I utilize notes. I mean, I have a list of things to do, and they're all combining everything from people I need to talk to the things I need to do with my kids. And they may, just know this. You can't really see it very well, but hundreds of pages of notes. And I guess it's just a practice that I adapted from when I was in college, trying to get 5 degrees at once. I would wake up at 4 a.m. and write out every single thing I needed to do for the day, and I would make sure I got it done. And it wouldn't necessarily be done in chunks of categorized, you would think, logical blocks, very intermixed.
You still wake up?
But I will say the networking piece has been able to propel me to be able to move faster and get information faster, just because I'm more connected to the right people. So, that used to be a challenge earlier in my career, was not necessarily having all of the facts and it taking longer to get the information that you need to move forward.
I'd like to piggyback. Time management was the hardest thing and the best thing. I think that's kind of what Elizabeth was saying with notes and waking up and realizing that you actually really have to wake up at 4:35 and get things done and stay organized. You can get so much done if you stay organized. And I'd also like to say, Elizabeth, your background, whatever you got going on, that's really cool. I haven't seen that yet on any Zoom calls, so that you go first. That's cool.
I've got more.
Yeah. Elizabeth is actually a Zoom expert. She was coaching me on Zoom a couple of weeks ago on some different things, and I've seen some great things with the SPE events that she has. So please look out for those.
Hey, Mark, can I get in on that?
Oh, please go ahead.
Hey, just real quick, because I'm a big geek about this too. It was just said. Jeff said it a minute ago, but getting things done. That's the system. I'll drop the link in the LinkedIn group, but yeah, GTD is getting things done. It's a formalized system. I like to think of it as a productivity lifestyle for getting all of your projects and your tasks out of your head and into a trusted system so that you don't have to think about them. Mm-hmm. And yeah, it's something that we work with customers on sometimes. It's actually how we run our projects. It's a whole way of thinking. Instead of writing down to-do lists, you write next action lists, and you categorize those based on location and different, it's just the whole, like I said, get it out of your head and into a trusted system. And that's what David Allen's Getting Things Done can help you do. So I'll put his TED Talk in the LinkedIn group. And he just put out an updated version of Getting Things Done, the first update since it ever came out in 1999. So check that out. That's out. Get it from Amazon and everything too.
Brian, do you mind touching on that as well, please?
Yeah. What was the question?
No worries. Time management.
My 4-year-old was running around in the background, so I was on mute yelling at him. So. He really wants to be on the call, so
he could join us. Nice. So yeah, it was just time management. How do you, I noticed, for example, we had our first meeting. We had to reschedule literally 12 times. So yeah,
I'm horrible with time management.
Really?
I'll tell you point blank. I mean, part of where I've been successful is I know I'm bad at it. And so I generally surround myself with, I'm fortunate to be in the position that I am, can hire people who are much better and smarter than me that keep me on track. But you're right, Mark, especially, this time of year, which is my craziest time. We're working 80 hours, 90 hours a week. Time management is massively crucial. So I'm fortunate to have a whole team behind me that could keep me on the right track for the most part.
Super. And we were supposed to end at 7:30, but because people have interesting questions, we're going into the networking portion of things, which we'll be doing on LinkedIn. So we're going to kind of continue a few more minutes answering people's questions. So Jeff, why did your company go for conventional wells when the trend in the US is unconventional? And I will touch on the fact that Jeff did say, and I think Warren Buffett says this as well, do the opposite of what everyone else is doing, basically. So anyways, go ahead.
Yeah, that's a great question. I don't know if anybody knows who Arthur Berman is. You should Google him. If not, he's a geologist, but I think he's the only pessimistic geologist in the world. He's brilliant in many ways, and he was the first one to show the reality of the unconventional game. For somebody like me and the companies that I was working with, you can think of them as mom and pop shops where every dollar is accounted for and it's very specific. They expect a certain amount of return in a certain amount of time. They understand the oil and gas world with respect to I put money down a hole and it might come back. And if it does, we expect this kind of rate. So it's much more predictable. When the unconventional side kind of came through, and it kind of came in two different phases or storms, if you will. And the first one was when everybody made money. People were flipping land, and the business model wasn't production. It was more mining when it got to production, but even then it was land flipping. I knew a lot of individuals that were wealthy and went broke because they had to pay these crazy working interests on these wells where you put a huge capital. First, you had to put a big capital down for the land, which was just wild. It was just so wild to watch. And you had to put a huge capital for each well. And then in order to get that return, you had to keep putting money into the well. So it looks great on paper if you're trying to sell, or like a hot potato game is what it looked like. People weren't really trying to develop. They were trying to improve it, do what their neighbor did, and then flip it before they did. And so I got to see some people spend a lot of money and not get a return. And the people that were making money were the landowners. And I think the reality of that is coming to fruition. We had a bunch of bankruptcies in 2015 and restructuring and smash codes, and now we have the same thing happening because a lot of these private equity or bank-backed companies needed cash flow. They needed it because the goal of flipping their value, it wasn't there anymore. So they started buying production, which was the right thing to do. But I listened to Arthur Berman. I looked at the numbers and realized I can't put $100 million into an area. I needed to work with things that were much more simple that I could understand. And those guys in the private equity world, those are big dogs. And I can't really play in that fight. I had to find my niche and stay there where I felt comfortable. So I felt much more comfortable putting $15 million over 10 different wells with an expected rate of return in a science that everybody understood, because I saw the unconventional world as still like a science experiment that wasn't really defined yet. And I didn't want to have to pay for a bunch of mistakes. I think it's gotten better and better and better every single year. And I think it will continue to get better and better, and that definitely is the future. I think it is just now less crowded, and people will look at actual balance sheets and the production rates a little bit closer. So I think it's a good thing. I think this is even out the market. I think conventional is great. I think unconventional is great. They both have ups and downs, but I will always probably be conventional just because I understand it.
Super. Warren Buffett also says that you should do what you understand as well. So Elizabeth, should we say seeking opportunities in our LinkedIn header? And what's a LinkedIn profile that stood out to you recently and why?
That's a question for me.
That's a question for you.
Well, I battle with that one. I do wonder if it hurts to some degree to say seeking opportunities in your header. However, you are seeking opportunities, but you do have the ability to click the recruiter button. I
can answer that question.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you don't need to put seeking opportunities in your header because if you close out the last place that you worked, you'll automatically show up in recruiter searches.
Right, and you can turn that on, but I guess the point is does that send a negative?
Yeah, I wouldn't put it there. I wouldn't put it there. No.
Employees who, potential recruiters.
Yeah, I feel like No.
Yeah. I would say don't brand yourself.
It's not a good look. Let's just put it
no,
that way.
it's not a good
It's not
look.
a good look because you want to make it look like you're busy, right?
Right.
I mean, that's one of the
And
things
that you're
that
active.
early in
And
sales.
so,
It's like, well, I don't know about Monday. I'm pretty booked on
Yeah.
Monday. We're looking at like a Tuesday. You know, Monday's totally
right.
open.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
And
so,
I
so,
mean,
yeah, I wouldn't put seeking opportunities up there.
yeah. Yeah. I would still try to utilize LinkedIn as much as you can to brand yourself and twist a picture to be able to market yourself in the best light. And there are things that you could do in the interim that could, demonstrate that you're keeping yourself busy. Examples, these consultations, there's lots of companies that are just looking for experts to give advice for a few hours here and there on various technical matters, or submitting papers that you can get paid for. I would just look for avenues to demonstrate activity rather than just saying you're unemployed.
Super.
However, I think to a degree, you need to know how to ask for things. And asking for a job is something that you may have to do and is important. But I think you should take other means of networking first and fully exploiting that, because I think you're just going to get so much more out of it right now.
Also taking Linda courses, because if you sign in, so everyone in America, if you go get a library card, every library in America, you have free Linda courses. You sign in through mine is through the Houston Library, right? And so and every time you sign in, you complete a class, you can publish it. It gets, because LinkedIn owns Linda, right? So everything that you can think of, all the software that you could think that you would want to design, all of the spreadsheets that you could work with, every single program is there. So how many skills have you added to your repertoire lately? I'm working on adding Python right now. That's my latest thing that I'm working on. So it's like what
The negotiation training.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, they have it. They have it actually. I know.
Yeah.
Nice. Thank you. So this might be the final question, and this is to Brian Matlock from Henry. I heard there was money waiting for times like these to jump in for acquisitions. Can you suggest private equity groups or investors that are ready to invest? Also, which kind of investment strategies do you think investors are looking for in these times? And then finally, is there any angel money for upstream? 3 questions.
Yeah, so I can't answer directly the names of organizations that are doing that, because
I knew you couldn't do that.
I have a securities license, so I can't do that. But what I can tell you is a couple of things. We talked about it earlier when Jeff had mentioned it. A lot of the investment groups are looking more towards, if they're putting new dollars today in midstream, some type of midstream asset. There's various midstream assets. Again, could be pipelines, could be terminals, etc. They're looking at that. Most of the investment groups that are looking at putting monies and opportunities right now, I would say, are your non-traditional energy private equity funds. Those are going to be either larger or what are referred to as agnostic private equity groups that invest in a multitude of strategies: healthcare, manufacturing, distribution, etc. And they're going to look to put money in energy. Your larger traditional private equity, energy private equity, names we probably all know, are not handing out much money right now. They are focusing on, and I think Jeff even might have mentioned it, a term is called smashcos, where you take portfolio companies that are already owned, pushing those together to create larger companies, and really it's economics of scale play. You reduce overhead. But they're looking at reducing costs, not putting new money at play. So yes, to answer that question, yes, there are opportunities out there. I would say a lot of them are going to be agnostic private equity groups that are maybe New York based or even London, or we've seen a lot out of China in the last year. that want to be in the midstream space, but not a lot at the larger traditional upstream private equity groups.
Superb. Thank you. And then I don't think you shared your LinkedIn in the group chat. So if you don't mind doing that, and everyone else, if you don't mind doing that, we're actually about to end the session. And so this is precisely why we created the LinkedIn group, because once we, hit shut down, all the information in the group chat is going to go away. And so I'd like to also thank Casey Langdon. Casey Langdon was the head of the Houston Geological Society's NeoGeos group. And I met up with Casey, I think a few months ago now. And, I don't know if it was his suggestion or the group's suggestion about doing an event for young geologists to help them understand, networking and the business side of things. And so he's been fantastic in kind of helping put this together. And so, please reach out. He's been in the background kind of, helping out. And then, myself, my name is Mark Hamzat. I'm a corporate strategist. I do, executive agent services, which means I work with executives similar to a sports agent and help them to, grow themselves, their businesses. I do public relations and business development work. My degree is in physics, with technological physics, and I used to process geophysical data. And in 2008, I found myself in that first downturn having to quote unquote network myself into, new roles and new opportunities. And that's how I got onto the more business side of things. I was on a board with the Geophysical Society of Houston, but I had to leave the oil and gas industry and go into the consulting world, the professional services world, which is where I've met, people, like Brian. And again, basically, I want to just kind of touch on the fact that what everybody has said, which is serve the industry, serve your network, get on boards. And once again, from whether it's just learning new skills to getting a new job to getting into your new business deal to, to getting a new client. Everybody on this panel has essentially said that networking is the way that they have grown. And so we definitely want to impress upon you to develop and grow your network. And as a physicist, my course, the people on my course, none of them were networkers. In fact, it's straight out of, whilst I was still in college, I was definitely the most popular person in my course. And so it can be hard for geoscientists and technical professionals to network. But, in light of what's kind of going on in the industry right now, you've got to come out of your shells. You can hide behind a screen now and do it on LinkedIn. And, if that's the way you want to do it, and obviously we will all be doing that for a while with social distancing, but I really, really want to impress upon you, just kind of like Elizabeth said, don't wait until you need your next opportunity to network. Go out there, serve your community, get to know people, get on boards, get these extra skills, learn how to do management, and it not only will you benefit the community as a whole, but you'll also, in the long term benefit yourself. So I want to, wish everybody a safe evening. If you do want to get onto the LinkedIn group, please go ahead and do that. Obviously, you know what we're going to do on there. We're going to learn about each other and, reach out to 3 people that you haven't met yet. Just reach out to them, just like Elizabeth said. Don't wait until you need the opportunity. Plant those seeds. It takes a few years to grow a tree, and nurturing, as we all know. So this was Show Me the Money. Thank you to the Houston Geological Society. Also, thank you to Sites We appreciate you, and we look forward to our next Show Me the Money event. So thank you.
Thank you.
Speaking of that, Mark, I do want to share my screen. We do have our next event almost ready to go. We're going to be focusing on investment vehicles and kind of focus on equities and options. And we have Serena and Chica. Serena's from Wells Fargo, and Chica started her own company called Taut. The information is on this flyer, and we're planning on having it on June 10th. So stay tuned on the website as well as the weekly newsletter, and on LinkedIn as well. I post either through just the regular feed, or I'll post in the NeoGeos group or the Show Me the Money group. You should see more information about that coming out soon.